of our webinar series for the webinars for MEDJACK. I welcome all of you here on behalf of CCIT. Welcome on board Dr. Athar, and is Zed here?
Zed hasn't joined yet, but I think he should be joining soon.
Right. Okay. Hello, Taha, our other speaker of the day, is here too. Hi, Taha, how are you doing?
Good, Alhamdulillah.
So excited to have all of you here, and without further wait, I'll let you guys get into a conversation, and we'll pull Zed in as soon as he joins.
Thank you, Maureen. So what I'll do is I'll, in the interest of the crowd over here, so people who are not familiar with the webinar series, it's called MEDJACK webinar series, and it's about, and the reason why we're having these webinars is because of the book, which is called it's called MEDJACK. The Extraordinary Journey of an Ordinary Hack. So if you allow me to show you a few slides, I'll just kind of quickly share my screen. Let me know if you can see this.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. So all right. So very quickly, and I'm not going to like spend too much time on this, but I really wanted people to understand what the context is over here. So MEDJACK is a book that we have published, we being CCIT. It's a co-innovation and incubation hub at AKU. We've been around for about 6 years or so. And this book is the culmination of that 6-year journey. Several implementations, several initiatives of ours, which have been curated in this book, which was published last month. And this webinar series was around the content of the book. And this is the second one, webinar in that series. MEDJACK, I'm not going to go over as to why we've called it MEDJACK. Anybody's interested, please go ahead and buy the book. It's a digital book at this stage, and the print copy should be available sometime in August. Hopefully, inshallah. And but for now, it's available on Kindle, Amazon Kindle platform, or the Kobo platform. So just, yeah. So medjack.net is the website. You can read more about the book and decide whether you want to learn about our processes and what we've done and what we've learned from it. It's really about clever ways of hacking healthcare and other problems to create low-cost sustainable solutions. It's a book that has 14 co-authors, and these are all people who've been at AKU. Most of them are still at AKU. Few of them have left AKU and are working in other organizations. This group of co-authors includes doctors, there's one nurse, there's an occupational therapist, there are engineers, biomedical engineers, IT, tech, business background. So it's a very multidisciplinary group, which is exceedingly important for a healthcare related innovation or incubation hub. And so the book is demonstrating a hub and spoke model for the co-innovation incubation platform of ours, CCIT being the hub at the center, which powers these 10 spokes, if I may, and the universe is these 10 spokes. These represent 10 different chapters. And very quickly, chapter 1 starts off by setting the stage very early on in why did we come up with this platform? What did we do, and so on and so forth. Ignite sessions that we started doing, and our experience of 7 Ignite sessions over a course of 6 or 7 years. Then our claim to fame, if I may, is really hackathons. And most people think that CCIT is equal to hackathons, but we're more than just hackathons. We're into incubation itself. Several cycles of incubation, early stage incubation and company formation for medical and nursing students and other people. So narrative medicine is chapter 5, a whole lot of information around that. We've started an innovation fellowship. Last year was the first one, and first cycle, and this year is the second cycle. Chapter 7 is Jogard in times of COVID-19, a very interesting chapter. And then chapter 8, text linked to innovation. This is important because this forms the basis for today's webinar and our panelists today. So, so this is really about technologies linked to innovation. How do we look at through CCIT and what our experiences have been? And we would get into a conversation with Dr. Athar Inam, Zaid Inam, and Taha Anwar around the content of this, not detailed content of this chapter, but really as a stepping stone to hopefully a very dynamic chat. And a bit of housekeeping over here, that if anybody, while they're listening to the questions or comments, if they get thoughts or they have comments and questions of their own, please feel free to populate the chat pod, and we'll interrupt, and then we'll throw those questions out to our panelists. Chapter 9 is going from health disease towards development, including arts and sciences, humanities and social sciences. And the last chapter is how do you put this all together into innovation for life, looking at philosophy, happiness, and so on. Okay, so that was a very quick introduction of what this book's content's about. This is just a sneak preview. We've got lots of colorful images, illustrations. It's a very data-driven approach to this book, evidence, a lot of evidence for what we've put out there. Another sneak preview of the chapter. And then what can you get from this book? You can learn from it, you can teach from it, and you can apply the methodologies of ours and adapt it and actually do these things even better than what we've done. So learn, teach, apply. It's an iterative circle, and that's it from me for the very quick introduction. Medjack.net is the website, and you can get a lot of information about the book from there. Okay, so done with that, and moving on to the much more exciting bit, and our panelists. So I'll do a very quick introduction of the panelists, and part of this process is that when we get up speakers to come on board, then each of them will then tell us a bit more, tell us about themselves more. So I'll start with Dr. Athar Inam, who's the chair of the Department of Surgery at AKU. He's a very well-known neurosurgeon, one of the best neurosurgeons in the country. He's also a clinical and basic science person, researcher in neurobiology, has had several accolades because of the work that he's done. The touch point between CCIT and Dr. Athar Inam through the Department of Surgery was the Global Surgery Hackathon, and he was the patron for that. And so hopefully we'll get some time to kind of bring that up later. Mr. Zaid Inam is Dr. Athar Inam's son, and we're very happy that we could do this son, father-son or dad-son kind of a duo approach over here. And so Zaid is a graduate of UC Berkeley in electrical engineering and computer science. And the reason we wanted to really have him over here was because of his startup called Cresta, which is an AI-based company, and we'll get into a chat with him about this. And then our third panelist is Mr. Taha Anwar, who's an engineer and an MBA. He works with the IT department, and his claim to fame is tech-based learning, digital learning, and for CCIT, he's been one of our pivotal core members from the get-go. He's our tech, IT, and data science mentor in residence, and he's one of the co-authors of Chapter 8 of MEDJACK, which is Tech's Linked to Innovation. We have two more co-authors of that chapter. Ariba Ahmed is a biomedical engineer, and Namra Nasir, who is also a biomedical engineer. And Ariba is on this call, and I don't know if Namra is on this call, but this chapter was co-authored by 3 engineers, 2 of whom are biomedical engineers. Alrighty, done with the introductions, and moving on to this discussion. I'm going to start off with Taha. Taha, so let's start off with you. And if you could very brief, and just if people could keep this in mind, that I might be a bit convoluted in my questions, because while I'm asking a question, I start thinking about something that might take us off on a tangent. But my questions could be convoluted, but your answers, please keep them brief and to the point so that we can keep moving on as well.
So you're saying you're a genius, right?
No, I'm saying I'm confused. What I'm saying is I'm really confused.
Okay.
So Taha, Taha, how have you defined, or how have the co-authors for this chapter defined technology from the chapter or the book's perspective? Because it's a vast area, and you had to kind of collect your thoughts and then kind of condense it into a bite-sized chapter. How did you guys go about it?
Yeah, so we looked into the meaning of the word technology, and if you look at it, the Latin word means an expression of ideas. But that then basically includes the arts and the humanities as well, which is not our understanding of technology in the modern day. So if in a nutshell, you can just call technology as the application of scientific knowledge to achieve practical results. So that's my brief answer on this.
Okay, that was a really very to the point answer. Thank you for that. Technos also, I remember that you had said, or you've written in that chapter that it's from Latin.
Yeah,
I don't know if
it's a Latin word. Techno and logia, they're like two Latin words joined together, and that's application of skills or ideas.
Okay.
Techno means skills or ideas that anybody possesses, and then logia is a word which means applying those practically.
And Taha, tell us what exactly what is tech for you specifically, and can it be different based on resources or the income level of the country?
Well, everybody has their own version of tech. So if you're talking broadly, all kinds of scientific knowledge applied, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's in another field such as data science, or um, even in there's technology being applied to arts and sciences, and in some other fields as well. So all of those do come under technology, but there are different ways of applying those to different fields. So you can take one technology, um, it could be a computer-based technology, or even you can talk about a wheel. A wheel is also a technology. A locking device is also a technology, and you can just pick that technology and see how it can be applied to achieve a specific purpose in your relevant field, and then that is the application of that device into a field, calling it technology.
Okay. So thank you for that. So I'd like to actually pose that same question to Zaid. Zaid, what is tech for you, and what are your thoughts around same question, based on resources, based on income levels, perhaps of the high income versus low income? Do you think that definition then also can be modulated or modified or adapted?
First of all, thank you for having me here. It seems like an excellent panel and like excellent group. So excited for the conversation. I think that one of the best things about technology is that it is something that can impact everything. And while the type of technology might be different, if it's like a wealthy nation that's producing information or software, and there's other parts of Africa or something where we're producing like pumps and wells, all those things are expression of human thought. Another phrase I really like about thinking about technology is the distillation of human thought. Like we have an idea, we distilled it into a physical concept, into a software concept, and that's technology. And what I really like about it is that it can ultimately be an equalizing force across the world. So regardless of whatever type of technology you're building, it empowers people to be more effective. And that's one of the best things about it.
Fabulous. I really like that distillation of human thought. And Taha brought up that point that it could be through humanities and arts and science, arts as well. And so that really widens the whole concept of technology, the way I keep thinking that it has to be a device, right? And if it's just a distillation of human thought, then it actually, it really completely blows my mind as well. There's so much more to it as well. So Athar, what do you think about this, right? What is tech for you? And from your perspective then, because you've worked in a high income setting and now you've been in Pakistan for a long time, and what are your thoughts around this?
So, well, thank you, Asad, for asking me this question. I'm a very simple man, so I can't give you those kind of, elaborate answers about technology. So for me, technology is anything that I can do to achieve a result with less resources. So if it is something that ends up using more resources to achieve the same result, then that's a waste of time and money. So as a surgeon, I think less and do more. You as a physician probably think more and do less. And they say about pathologists, they may think or do whatever the patient is already gone by that time. So for me, whatever I can do with lesser, even my hand movements, the number of steps that I can reduce to achieve a certain result. That's what is technology for me. That's the useful part of technology for me. So that's the way I look at it. And it can be very simple things. So I can give you example in terms of resources. For example, when we use endoscope to go to the tumor through the nose, we have this elaborate instrument that comes pretty expensive. And one of my residents said that, instead of using this tube, why don't we just cut a tube from chest tube and use that as a portal? And it worked fine. And, that's like probably 100 the cost of that expensive tube that was being used. It did my work, cost less money, cut down the number of steps. So that's technology for me.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's really great, because I love the fact that you've put in surgery and actual your own practice, and you've put that into context or technology in the context of surgery. And one of the questions that I had listed, or Marine had listed for you, was how important is it to be innovative from a surgeon standpoint? And I think if you could maybe address that as well. So how linking technology to innovation and to a surgeon's skill set?
So I mean, initially what we have to do is we have to master whatever has been established. Once we do that, then we move on to this phase where we can use innovation. This is little different than how the innovators like you look at things. You talk about thinking out of the box and all that thing from the very beginning. In surgery, where there's more at stake, we can't do that. And actually, that reflected in what you said. I remember you said, uh, learn, teach, practice,
Hmm.
right? Whereas in surgery, the adage is, you see one, you do one, you teach one, and then go back to it again. So there's a difference of sequence of how we learn and how we use the technology to achieve a certain result. So once you have mastered whatever has been established over time, because you don't have the luxury of innovation in when a person's life is at stake, when you have a brain opened up, you're not going to say, hey, I got an out of box idea, let me try this. That's We don't have the luxury of doing that. So you have to master that thing. And so that's the technological culture that you are passing through in your training phase. Once you have gone through that, then you start to uh, come with innovative technology. So I don't know if that does that answer you. Is that what you were asking?
No, it does. It does, actually. It really does. And yeah, it's a great. It kind of provides a lot of insight into, I guess, how the surgeon looks at innovation versus an ER physician like myself looks at innovation. And Diana's made that comment. Excellent take on innovation from a surgeon. Brilliant. Very helpful. Thank you for that, Zaid. Okay, so Zaid, I want you to tell us a story. Keep it brief because we don't have a lot of time. I don't even know if you're a storyteller from that perspective, but tell us a story about yourself and link it to innovation. And through that, perhaps we can get a glimpse into who is Zaid Inam.
Wow, that's a tall order.
That's a tall order, right?
That's a tall order, tall problem. Story for innovation. I think, I mean, in the context of, I think one of the things I appreciate for, like, in the context of, obviously we're in a group of medical professionals. In the field I'm in, I'm in software. My company, we build artificial intelligence, and the kind of software we build is how do we build humans? How do we build software to think like humans do, and how do we build them to have conversations like humans do? And one of the things that comes up is that in that kind of field, you can take a lot of risk, where you can sort of you can write software that doesn't work, that might have a bug or might have a mistake. And because of that, you can move much faster in terms of what is the software you're producing. And you can try many more things and try many more experiments. And I recognize, like, sort of the opposite of this sometimes in the medical field is that you have to undertake a lot of risk. there's a lot of risk in terms of a patient's life might be at stake or someone's health might be at stake. And so it's much harder to innovate in that kind of environment where you can't move quite as fast. But I think there's certain concepts from software that apply, where a lot of the investment in software is really about how do you create that infrastructure where even if you do make a mistake, the mistake isn't egregious. So you invest a lot in like testing and continuous development and continuous integration, where you're building all this infrastructure where, let's say, an engineer on the team, even if they produce a bug in the code, it's quickly identified and quickly reverted, or it's like prevented from being a catastrophe in production before it gets rolled out to everyone. And that's a really big field of software, this underlying infrastructure and testing. And it's a really key part of it. And I think the fundamental thing there is that it's often the people that can produce their own tools that are the groups that innovate the fastest. And so I believe that the reason software has like moved so far ahead is because software engineers can produce their own tools to then do more things and increase the abstraction and ultimately increase the velocity of their innovation. And I'm really excited because I think it's increasingly becoming possible for medical professionals to do that as well. I think there's so many things that medical professionals can innovate on, just like B or my father was saying, on sort of just a simple example of innovation that he had in the sort of surgical during the middle of a surgery. I think there's many kinds of innovations that are like that are possible, and they're just having the right infrastructure to be able to do it. And so giving people the opportunity to take a risk like that or innovate on a device, and then having the right infrastructure so like the risk of that situation is even if things don't go 100% well, it's like it doesn't have as big of a problem in terms of the health of the patient. And I think there's a lot of things that people can do there. And once you have that, then I think you can move a lot faster, and you can open up innovation and open up sort of the velocity of risk taking. Yeah, that's not a story of myself. I don't know how interesting a story of myself would be, but that was just overall, just looking between software and healthcare. I think there's a lot.
Very interesting story, Zad. So
two could learn from.
So Zad, without embarrassing you, I want to say that the most innovative part that Zad did was in high school. He said, "I'm gonna drop out of school," and so hum log ko sabko na saap, so we all were like, "What?" But then at the same time, I realized that knowing Zad with his independence and he was all innovative from the very beginning. I realized that this is not just coming up like that. He has a plan behind it, and he dropped out of school, uh, set up a company over here in Karachi, which was very successful. At one point, as a high schooler, the company's evaluation in Dawn magazine read was about $1 million on paper at least. So he dropped out. But then he went back to Berkeley, and then dropped out again from Stanford to do this with Sebastian Thrun. Sebastian Thrun himself is an innovator with the Google Auto or the auto drive cars and all that thing. I just wanted to say one thing, Asad, that we tend to think that technology and innovation go together. There are a lot of innovations that don't need technology, right? And I think you sort of alluded to that early on in your discussion. And there's a lot of technology that does not need innovation. It's just a repetition of whatever has been done. So that's something that we need to be aware of, that we shouldn't think of technology innovation, and that's a common mistake. What do you think about that?
That's a great point. Actually, you've raised a few very interesting points, and I'd like to get to them. But this last point that you've raised is fabulous because Taha, Ariba, and Namra make that point in the chapter itself. And the purpose of the book was that we talk about innovation and that particular chapter, text link to innovation, but from a low cost perspective. And I think these guys, the co-authors, came to that conclusion that running after technology for each and everything is probably not necessarily just linked to innovation as well. And there's something called technology bias. Taha, do you want to expand on that?
Sure, thank you, Asad. So that's a very interesting part that I really enjoyed working on in the chapter, because I've learned this from experience of presenting technologies for solutions. Because I'm a IT person, and people generally come to me for a technology to solve a problem. And I've learned from experience that at times I have to tell them that maybe technology is not the route for you, or not the right solution for you. So I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, in one of the medical colleges, they came up with a need to engage students at some level for some activities. But when we did a brainstorming session with them, we were told that the students won't really log into another app. So we had an app that fitted the purpose, that gave them all the functionality that they needed to engage the students for that curriculum need. But they knew that the students are not going to log on to another app, because there comes a time when there are just too many things for you to interact with. It's kind of like say a lethargy that you feel when you have to learn too many systems at the same time, and it could be a bias that you might develop, that a technology app or a solution or something like that, implementing that would solve the purpose. But then the users tend to do is then they try to find ways around. And what students in this case would do is they would just get the nerdy one to log into the app, take a screenshot, and share the thing on a WhatsApp group for the rest of the students. And they won't log into the app, which would defeat the basic purpose. So coming to a more general perspective, I think
That's innovation, though, right?
yeah,
Yes,
Exactly.
by definition, that's innovation.
Innovation that
That's
removes,
jugaad. It's jugaad.
Sorry,
that
go
actually removes the use of a technology.
ahead.
So there's a certain amount of lethargy, more so in the previous generation than the current generation, but it's still there, of people learning new technologies, because there's a learning and a process in which you become comfortable with the technologies. So as innovators, you have to be very, very tactful. You have to go into the shoes of the user, and you have to understand what impact a new solution would have in the general sense, apart from just solving the problem that you're looking for. What impact you should have, it would have, and then think about implementing the solution. Otherwise, your solution is just going to fail. Another example that I would like to quote is the Jugaad Innovation Challenge. So last year, the CCIT, since we used to do hackathons almost every year, and last year was when COVID hit, and everything, like we couldn't have gatherings like a hackathon. What we did was we shifted it to a virtual event. And initially, our plan was to use a software called a learning management system, where people just come together in a single place, and then they work, and they have all of the right tools to interact and collaborate and form projects. But it didn't work. We set up the LMS, but people would just prefer WhatsApp and Facebook, and so we had to pivot. We had to just allow that to happen. We couldn't force people who are coming into an innovative event to log into a fixed tool and do things our way. So that's what I feel you have to be very cognizant of when you're innovating. So technology, like Dr. Athar again said, it might not always be the solution.
Very well said, Taha, and thank you for expanding on that and giving us examples. And yes, I do recall from last year when we completely pivoted our methodology from what we'd been doing with hackathons before, which were all face-to-face events, and then we had this virtual audience, right? And the numbers of hackers went up because of that virtual nature, and it was utilizing technology, I guess, and an LMS that was set up for virtual learning for a group was not of that much interest to people, and they would prefer to go use social media. So I find these very interesting ways of alternative ways of education as well. So good points. I'm going to pause here, and there are two questions. Mohammed Bhanji is asking, to democratize technology and innovation, should we instead pivot to talking about critical thinking for problem solving undertaken for the benefit of humanity? Zaid, would you like to address that? What do you think?
So I believe that everyone has the opportunity, everyone can be innovative, and everyone has a creativity to be innovative, and it's more about, do they have the environment to do so? So like if people have the environment and have the resources and the tools and the place where they can take an idea, test it, tinker and experiment, then that's an environment that will flourish. So it's again, it goes back to like the investments and like how do you give people the tools to be able to build something and test it out and try it, and in a place where the mistake isn't costly. So like one of the nice things about the Valley is that I can start a company, right? And it's an idea. You take an idea, you build a product, you take it to customers, and if it's successful, that's great. You build a successful product and successful company. If it doesn't work, it's not a huge deal. Like obviously it weighs on you heavily as an entrepreneur, but you're not a black sheep of the Valley if like you have a failed company. And that kind of environment sort of fosters that kind of innovation and creativity. So I think it's just the way to do it. I would just lead by example. So the more people that lead by example, it creates a culture. It creates a culture where risk taking is okay. And I would just take more risks. And risks are places where you can try an idea, try something out, and if it doesn't work, it's okay, and you try again. And the more people that do that, the more sort of it becomes a virtuous cycle. The more people that try new things, and the more the culture becomes innovative. And I think that's really core to it. The core thing is taking the risk in the first place. This is my belief. This is my personal belief.
No, I like that. So two important points you've raised is leading by example and then taking risks, right? And it's pretty much for everyone. So democratizing innovation means that everyone is able to articulate that they have that skill set. It's just letting it surface. That's what I've also been feeling over the past few years. Thank you for that, Zed. So Eamon has a question for Dr. Inam. In your opinion, how can a surgeon dive into innovation, as we don't study innovation and technology as subjects in a med school?
Yes, so that is true. But do we study innovation in any school? Not really, right? I mean, I don't know about Taha. I'm not sure about Zad's courses. Were there like classes of innovation 101 and all that thing? So all these people, they have this innovative mind. And I have some of my associates over here, Hassan Ali Khan, he's a neuro-oncology fellow, a globetrotter, went across the world, medical school, and was in Brazil and was in USA. And he started a brain tumor lab. And, it's pretty innovative that he has brought that idea over here, and using 3D printing to create the skulls, and then teaching the dissection on that one. Kiran Aftab, she is with a master's from University College London. You talk about imaging studies and all that things. She's pretty innovative and looking in the how can artificial intelligence be used to differentiate between tumors and other lesions such as TB. Hamza Bajwa, again, young innovative mind coming up, showing things. So I think the innovative people, they have this knack of doing those innovative things, and they don't go through any special course, but they imbibe or absorb those innovative uh, 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 how to innovate. They absorb that from the surrounding, and that's where we miss out a lot in our culture, because as Zad mentioned, we as a culture don't are not very forgiving to the risk takers, and innovation for that reason is not so prevalent as it is. And Silicon Valley is not really, it's off the norm, by the way, right? But even in the median of the culture of let's say North America, there's a lot of potential to go through risk taking and not being rebuked or made fun of or things like that. So I think more than the course, it is the culture that produces that in you. So that's my point. Sorry for a long answer. Was that Mohammed? No, who asked that question? Ayman, right? Does that answer your question, Ayman? Ayman,
Yes, sir. Yes. It's answer my question, and also I want to ask one more question. Like, as a HOD, how much you give free hand to your resident to do something innovation in the field of healthcare? Like, as you mentioned, one of your experience about the chest tube, and what do you
right.
think? what do you think about how much one HOD can boost up their resident to dive into innovation? Because it's the fact of the HOD. Now, like HOD boost up the resident to do some research to find out some another solution. So, what
Okay.
do you think about that?
Okay. So, think about it. You're trying to land a plane, and the main pilot, the young co-pilot wants to try. Hey, can I land with this angle a little bit? So that person is gonna don't even touch the anything on the instrument, right? That's the way it is. I can't afford to take any risk. So that's not the issue of culture. It's the issue of the situation. So I don't think I can allow a lot of innovation when it comes to actually when we are operating on the brain. But then when it comes to other things, so you can, Asan Ali Khan is over here. Asan, you can speak up. I mean, I have let Asan do whatever he wants to do. And every time Asan comes with an idea that, I'm going to do it this way, I said, hey, that's great. So, in those areas where the risk taking is not going to hurt anybody else, that's where, Asan, I see that you have unmuted yourself. Go ahead, say anything.
Right, sir. So thank you for the opportunity. So I think what Zad was also mentioning is that, and the culture that you mentioned, I think it's very important that you have to think where you are and what ideas you are going to share. Not everyone is supportive. Like you said, we live in a culture that's not forgiving. So if I'll say something crazy, I'm confident enough that I can share those ideas with you, but I'm not sure if I'm going to share all those ideas with everyone. So it's very important. So you have to understand. But there are some people who are just not scared. They will just say it. But not everyone has that courage, because there are many people who will try to break you down, who will laugh at you. But it depends, like where you are going to talk, what you are going to talk, and how you're going to share. So in my case, I have been lucky because you have been supportive, and maybe some other people also here can say the same thing. But I just want to say that we all are learning, we all are evolving. If you think you have an idea and you believe in it, even if you see your colleagues and people around you are just saying that's not going to work or it's not worth to try it, I think the best thing is don't just give up. Just try it. So don't just give up. That's all. Thank you.
But you do mention, so culture is one of the things, right? That
Yes, sir.
people around you, not just one person, but the whole culture. That's more powerful
Exactly.
than one person, right?
That's true, sir.
One thing, if I can say, I think it's culture, and it's also what is the cost of a mistake. So in software, the cost of a mistake with the right infrastructure is low. If you go look at these like old school banks, they have these like very, what I would say, stodgy cultures where they're not innovating on their core processes because the cost of like a financial transaction or something, the cost of risk or in that thing is very high. And then like in medicine, like the cost of a patient's health, or the cost of sort of someone a patient on the table in terms of surgery, the cost of them passing away because of a innovation that didn't go well is high. And then I think like if you look at those environments, I think the places that people have been able to really innovate and like change the culture to like really innovate fast is, can you create the right infrastructure or the support where even if you make a mistake, you try something new, it makes a mistake and it doesn't work, the negative impacts aren't large enough. Either society is okay with the negative impact, like it just in this example, just because I'm just gonna play it up, Silicon Valley, right? Like if let's say a company doesn't work, yes, maybe 100 people don't have a job anymore, but because there's so many jobs and the relative economy is okay, like it's okay to make that kind of mistake, and it's the negative impact on society isn't very large. If we could build infrastructure where you could try something, a new medical device quickly, and the negative impact on a patient's health can be prevented, where there's infrastructure to prevent that from becoming like a major problem, then you could take a lot more risks and you could try many more things. And the core part of innovation is really that underlying risk taking, where you're trying a new idea, seeing whether it works or not, and then learning from that process. And so I really do believe it's that investment in the infrastructure that's really needed. And that might be through like simulation. So like you're simulating these environments and you're seeing like, okay, we try this idea. Does this result in something that's better? Do we learn something from this? Let's try it again. Let's try it in a different way. But there's all kinds of ways to build that infrastructure. I think that's really important.
So it's a risk to benefit ratio, right? I'm sorry.
No, go
That's
ahead.
what it means. But how do you calculate the risk to benefit ratio? It's all projection. It's all uh, guesstimation, right?
Yeah, but like you can systematically improve that, because you can like build tools that reduce the risk for all kinds of situations. Like this is a small setting. So like so I became friends with this lady named Elizabeth Holmes, and so she built like this company called Theranos, and Theranos is obviously like touted publicly as a fraud. All kinds of things. There's all kinds of things on Theranos as a company, but
I said you met her, right? You know her, don't you?
Yeah. No,
No.
not really.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Go ahead. Yes. Okay.
But basically, like I think like what happened there is that like the core, she had a few ideas, and she's always had these ideas, and the core of those ideas, like there's something where you want to try something and try it out in the medical field. But the thing is, like I'm just being very honest, like in this innovation, in this like kind of medical field, the risk of a patient's health and the risk of like sort of a detrimental impact on someone's health and well-being is so high that some of the risk taking that would be okay in software isn't okay in a medical device, in the form of medical devices. And because of that, like like I think there's a world where Theranos was a successful company, and I think there's a world where like that became something that worked, and it became this like distribution of blood testing that we could do everywhere. But the thing is, obviously the risk is too high. So then I think what you want to do is you want to figure out how do you like sort of reduce that risk through the right tooling and infrastructure. So I'm not going to go out and say I'm a supporter of Theranos, but like if you have an idea like that, like you can go and deploy those kinds of things, reduce the risk of bad outcomes for patients, but then still try many more of these things. Because I think yes, in the short term, like if you don't take these risks, you're better off because you have less impact on patient health. But in the long term, you zoom out 100 years, like if we don't advance medical technology in 100 years and like we're still in the same place that we are right now, like we are like it's like, whoa, like what are we doing here? Like at 100 years, medical technology should be dramatically different than what it is right now. And like it happens in the risk taking that happens right now, in the kinds of things we can try and ideas we can try now. And then when you zoom out, like after 100 years, it's like step changes in that. And I think that's what's important. And I think that's what we got to get right.
So this is a fascinating discussion, and I think it might warrant many more hours of like these kinds of chats. This is such a like-minded group, I feel, and then these are the kinds of conversations that we want to be generated and to be sustained as well through this webinar series. I don't know how far we can do that, but in the future, even Zaid and Athar, love to kind of like keep the conversations going, because the points that you're raising, they're so valuable and they're so important. So I think I kind of like simplify things in my own head and like, okay, what is it that we're really lacking? And and I agree with Athar that I think it's that innovation ecosystem, or the culture of innovation. And for me, it's a simple, straightforward answer to that question is, so what's the major problem? It's the lack of a culture or ecosystem of innovation, because then everything kind of comes within that. So even the points that I think that Zed's raising, risk taking, for example, or something along those lines, I think I could fit it into that culture of innovate or ecosystem of innovation. But that's just me trying to simplify this whole thing. And it's been a fascinating journey for us at AKU as well, and how we've gone about it. And someday we can get into a longer conversation around this as well. But I'm cognizant of time because we really wanted to get some. Well, I think Athar, actually, I think you've read my script, because there was a question that you were not privy to, but you asked Zaid, and that was, what do you recall of Zaid as a child or a teenager, and that can indicate to us his drive or passion for innovation. I think you've kind of covered that question already.
I can embarrass Zad so much that he will switch off and leave. So, but then I think, Zad, I'm gonna avoid that, right? I mean, what
you go for it.
what you did. So okay, all right, Zad, you allowed me. Okay, so Zad was maybe 2 years old, or a year and a half old, and we were crossing a street, and Zad's elder brother was with me, so I let him walk with me, and I grabbed Zad's hand. and I crossed it across this. We crossed across the street, right? Zed suddenly, अपना हाथ उसने छुड़ा लिया मेरे हाथ से, and he ran back. And luckily there was no car over there. He ran back, and then he came back again himself. Said, why were you holding my hand when the other one's hand was not being held? So that was a streak of independence that Zad had, and I think that probably everybody has a little different streaks from early on, and that's what probably has helped him in my mind to. But then the environment is has a lot to do as well. So actually, Zad, here in a public forum, I'm going to ask you those questions. So you were as a dropout over here, and you came across a lot of people, and you were trying to set up something, and then you again dropped out in Stanford. But then there was Sebastian Thrun, the master innovator of the world. So did you feel that there was a difference in how much your innovative juices could flow in an environment in Karachi when you had an office that you set up and something, and over there in Stanford? Was there a difference or there was no difference?
I think the biggest thing, or this is, I don't know, it's a personal thing, and I think the biggest thing was self-confidence, or how to think about, like, I think that comes to the core of it. I think to do things, to innovate, to take risk, it comes back from like but for me personally, it's like having that self-confidence of I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make the bet on myself. So like in a situation where like all kinds of things could happen, I'm going to make the bet on myself that I'm going to take this risk, even if like people perceive it to be a risky thing. Like it's based on what I know about myself, it's a calculated risk, and because I know I'll figure out a way here. And I think the right environments, it's like you develop that over time. It's like a personal development for someone over time. I think with self-confidence and all these things, is that you develop that personal self-confidence over time, and you develop your understanding of yourself. And I think the very best people, I mean, it depends, but a lot of people I know who like end up taking these risks successfully, it's like always comes back to like they made the bet on themselves in this kind of in a decision point where like, do I do this risky thing, or do I do this like more conventional standard thing? It's like, well, I'm going to make the bet on myself because I believe I can do these things, and that's I think the crucible for that decision.
There's a question by Asfan Yar which actually fits here. What ignites the right kind of culture? So Asad, what do you think? Isn't that a question? I mean, we can keep on talking about it. What really ignites that? Is it like critical mass that suddenly develops, and then what brings that critical mass?
I love that question, but I think to answer that question, I think there are components to that as well. And so, what ignites the right kind of culture? I think the culture somewhat is already there if we're talking about an organization like AKU, right? So, if I can use that as a case point, so I think the culture is somewhat over there, but it might be sketchy, it might be in silos, and so igniting might mean breaking down those silos or those barriers or those hurdles and bringing people together. And what we've tried to do through CCIT over the past several years is to be very collaborative, saying that, for our hackathons, it's not just for a certain type of student or a certain discipline. It's open to anyone and everyone who's interested in that theme of the hackathon. And when we go out into the community, and it's community-based hackathons, a similar approach. So I think being collaborative perhaps ignites that right kind of culture. Being okay with risk taking, and I know that Zaid, and you also using the example of health and surgery, for instance, but there are other areas within a healthcare organization, such as teaching learning, and Taha is very familiar with digital learning and blended learning approaches. We are very familiar with learning alternative approach to education of medical students and nursing students through hackathons and Ignite sessions and innovation fellowships and so on and so forth, right? So we don't always have to think about patients in health innovation. I think it's much broader than that. There's education of students, there's education of trainees as well, and not everything has to be tied into patient outcomes. And I think that kind of allows you to be to play in that area of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship as well, without necessarily being too, stuck to patient safety or patient quality, if I may. So igniting the right kind of culture. Love that question. Thank you for that, Esfandyar. And I think it's a very, when you look at it holistically, it's a very multi-purpose kind of with various things. And love to get into a further conversation. If nothing else, please get the book, and we've written about all of these things in that book as well.
It's a,
if I may add,
I think it's interesting. It's a very interesting question. If one point quick point I'd like to make on it is, if you look at the most innovative company in the world right now is Amazon, because Amazon is able to, it started as a bookstore, but they've expanded from there to basically innovate on these products, these consumer products, from everything from like all kinds of things online to Amazon Web Services to like all these different products, Amazon Go, Amazon Prime. And it's a company that at scale, with 200,000 people, is still innovating. And it's the one company I would say in corporate America that's like continues to be that like the juggernaut that's even at this high scale is able to do so much and is able to invent so many new things. And I think there's a few things that culturally Amazon gets right. One is that it's that thing about taking risks at Amazon. Like, you can take risks and it's okay, and like they're bets that people make. But there's a second thing where culturally Amazon is very focused on the customer, and so they have like a very strong customer focus and customer obsession that they're going to invent on behalf of the customer. And so that's like a cultural thing that's set from the top. Jeff Bezos is just very good at creating these kinds of cultures. But like, it's like if you have a whole company that's really focused and obsessed about the user, which is the customer in their case, and then they're allowed to innovate and take risks and bets, and you're building infrastructure, then like you have a few of the necessary pieces necessary to do that. And I think oftentimes what happens in a large organization is that the company loses sight of the customer. It loses sight of whether it's the student or whether it's the patient, and gets caught up in its own politics and internal dynamics and all these things. And if you can't maintain that focus on it, if you can maintain that focus at scale, then you can innovate and create a really strong culture that innovates. But if you sort of lose that sight and get caught up in your own politics, then that's where these things stagnate.
There's some really good questions and comments coming up, but we have 8 minutes to go, unless people want to stick on, and you can address some of these questions. Taha, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to build onto this. So agree with you, Asad and Zed, on these how you could set up a sort of an innovative culture in an organization. But I think the second stimulus that really pushes innovation forward is need, dire need. So in low resource settings where people don't even think about setting up a culture of innovation, yet if you look into it, you'll find a lot of innovations over there. You mentioned Jugaad, and so I think need is what really drives innovation forward at an accelerated pace. So think about the vaccines that we're using for COVID. We know that they pose health risks, and it's been proven. But the risk, since we were also talking about risk, the risk of taking the vaccine is outweighed by the risk of not taking the vaccine, and maybe that is also the sort of situation which pushes a medical innovation forward, where using a risky thing is less risky than not using that thing in that particular situation. Again, another thing that COVID has really driven forward is the use of these virtual software and technologies. So technologists have been pushing these tools forward for various benefits for a number of years. But there was a very famous meme that went out. So who brought about the technological transformation or the digital transformation of your company? So CEO, no. CIO, no. COVID, yes. So I think that the need of the hour also really drives forward innovation. And we at times maybe could create a situation where the need is really felt to innovate and move forward.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Taha. Maybe we can take one or two of these questions. As Esfandyar was asking, will technological innovation mostly become a software problem 20 years down the line, or does it naturally evolve to that? Taha, I think this might be up your alley.
Yeah, sure. So good question. I don't think so, because technology is meant to serve humans, and we are in the physical world, or so as we perceive it. There are theories that we might be a simulation in our own as well, but as we perceive it, as compared to the software world, we are in the physical world. So no matter how far the softwares progress, there always need to be an interface between us and whatever the softwares achieve for us, and that interface would always have to be physical. It can't be virtual. You can't just spend your lives lying down in an incubator and just spending your life in a virtual world. You have to be out in the physical. So I don't think it's going to completely replace the physical world. The technologies would become more and more lean in that sense. So they might a computer which occupied 10 rooms achieved 50 years ago can be done by something which is as small as a pocket watch, or maybe if you talk about your cell phones, they can achieve like about 100 times more than what 10 rooms worth of computers were able to achieve 50 years ago. So the technology physical footprint is going to become smaller, but they'll always be out there in the physical world.
I'm not, if I can say one thing, I'm not sure I disagree with that. If you look, so you look at sort of, I think a fundamental technology that's going to happen in the next 10 years is a self-driving car. And self-driving cars are going to be possible because you can, it's hard to like get every single example when you're building a software to build a self-driving car, to get every single example in the real world of what, like all the different traffic situations. But the reason these things are advancing right now is because you can build simulators of these environments where you can test a million different combinations, different traffic patterns, where you have a pedestrian with a dog coming in front of a street, or you have like a whole set of traffic scenarios, like a couple cars coming together. And that's a case where it's another example of this, where like it's really high risk to put a self-driving car on a road because the risk of human life is very high. But you can reduce that risk and innovate on ideas on what is the underlying algorithm for a good self-driving car in software, tested in a wide variety of edge cases, a wide variety of scenarios. And then once you bake it in software, then you can take it back into the real world. And so that's a case where like these ideas there's a set of infrastructure that can reduce the risk of you can take a risk, you can take innovation on an algorithm idea, bake it into software, prove that it works, and then take it out into the real world. And I think like that kind of abstraction is going to get it's going to get murkier and murkier over time. And like, you'll be able to do a lot more things. I think we'll be able to do eventually surgeries like that. We'll be able to create simulations for entire surgeries and all the edge cases, the way surgery can be done in software. You can test out different types of robotic surgery algorithms on how they approach a brain based on what is a simulated sort of patient body or simulated environment there.
But the basics have to be mastered though, right? I mean, without, so you know, Adnan, and I know we're running short of time. Adnan Salim is a neurosurgery resident. And I would put Adnan on the spot here. Adnan, what do you think? I mean, I'm pretty suppressive of innovation when it comes to neurosurgery, right? Like you have to open up the skull in a certain way. You can't, once you master that, then you can go. Is that how you feel, Adnan? This is okay if you say bad things about me. Adnan, are you?
I mean, I'm not sure if that, but like that makes sense, right? Because you're running a military. Like when you're running when you're doing surgery, it's like basically it's a military. You have a precise operation you need to run because the patient's life is on the line. But imagine like even if you could try a different way of entering the skull and it wouldn't affect, like you could take that risk because the patient's life wasn't on the line. Then you could try 5 different ways of entering the skull, and maybe you'd find a different way that, hey, if we entered this way, 4 ways resulted in the death of the patient, but the 5th way was like, oh, if you do it this way, actually, it turns out the patient's outcomes actually improves a little bit. Then all of a sudden, like it just you're running a military right now because you need precision on your team. I don't know if Adnan agrees.
Adnan may or may not agree, or Hamza can say something. All right. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Adnan agrees, sir.
So you see the innovation that I'm putting it here. Adnan is not even saying anything. Dr. Anam, you are wrong. No, he's just like, okay, I'm gonna keep quiet.
Was that an automaton, like some robotics or something? AI. We wanted to talk about Krista, and but I think we've kind of run out of time. And one of the last questions we like to pose is a take home or parting comment, not from all the panelists, because I think it's going to take a longer time, but so wrap up message from the father and son duo. Okay, so if you could together perhaps give us a parting comment or two for young innovators and entrepreneurs or the mavericks out there looking to launch something similar to what Zaid's been doing, and Athar as the father, and so I think we've kind of got some of that insight already, but take home for
मेरा एक ही जुमला है, learn to trust when you have a child that's an innovator. So trust it, trust that person. That's my bottom line.
So as a father, you're saying that trust your child's whatever the child's interest is, whether it's innovation or otherwise, just
I mean, you
be
can be a
okay with
safety
what the
net, you
child.
can be a safety net around, but then just trust the child, and the child
Okay.
will do whatever.
Very good, very valuable. That in itself is very valuable, right? And Zaid,
Don't trust your father. No, just kidding.
Trust your father. That's good.
He's lying.
No, it's good. No,
Just
I don't know
kidding.
how Abhi runs his. I scrubbed in once to one of his surgeries, and yes, he runs a military, which he needs to. He's doing surgery, right? But I do remember fondly, like a few times where he nurtured, like there were like, just even when I was like a small boy, right? We had a bunch of plants in our backyard, and one of these plants, like when you put your finger around it, when you put your finger on the plant, it wraps around the stem wraps around your sort of finger. And we just basically spent 30 minutes experimenting with that. We tried different things. We tried sticks and twigs, and just the curiosity of like, what does a plant do here? Why does it do it? These kinds of things. I think like those are things that you remember in terms of like just fostering curiosity and fostering sort of just a natural curiosity for the world, and natural thing where you want to try different things. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think like that's stuff like that sticks. So like you need to have different sort of operating styles depending on where you are and how you're operating. But I think like fostering that curiosity and just leading by example, like, hey, let's ask questions, let's explore the world, let's see what happens if you do this, let's see what happens if you do this. Those kinds of things you remember, and you sort of build your character.
great, brilliant. I mean, so we've got take home message for younger folks, fostering your curiosity, nurturing your curiosity, exploring, and for a parent to trust his or her child, and what the child is telling the parent. I think it's really important, particularly in our culture, which tends to be, I think, much more restrictive as well. And the only certain kinds of disciplines or professions that people or parents would kind of agree with, doctor bano, engineer bano, ye bano, wo bano, or college ko pura karna hai. And here's Zaid, who's kind of demonstrated that you can get into the topmost colleges and schools and yet not complete them. And so he's our poster child for, like, I know he's the Zuckerberg that we know, or something along those lines, right? So
better looking and more charismatic.
good job. That's a good one. So these comments have been fabulous. I love this comment about Essen put this here about first step towards innovation can be following other successful examples and building capacity, the Chinese model. I disagree with that, but yes, we don't have time. But Essen, we should get into a discussion around the Chinese model versus the non-Chinese model. And then there were some other comments, and Sidra Kamal has written an essay for us. Thank you very much. I'm saying you don't have time to read the whole thing, but lovely. What if we took a different approach? Certainly, we can take any approach that we want, and so not to be in the box, and those kinds of things. I don't know what it kind of goes on about sleeping bag innovation. Okay, fine, no time. We're out of time, folks, and it's been fabulous. It's been really very engaging, lots of comments, lots of questions, a lot of energy. And we are really appreciative to our panelists, guest speakers, Taha Anwar, Zaid Inam and Athar Inam, and hopefully this is just a start. Love to remain connected. Taha, you don't have much of a choice. You're part of the team anyways. And any parting comments, anyone?
Thank you for having us, Asad. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you and good night or good morning to Zaid. Go back to sleep. Okay. All right, bye. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, bye.
Office.